Hello, healers and health seekers. It's me, Ichota, healing with medical medium information for 4 years now. Mercury retrograde in effect. I am having technical difficulties. Yes, there is this room. So I'm using this room. Yes, that's a pool table. It's the only room I could get. There's just going to be noise anyway. It doesn't matter. I got myself this wind screen for my microphone, for my camera, right? I was going to test it out today. I'm like, I'll go outside. I'll make a video. I'll test it out with the wind. This is not real fur. It's synthetic. So I go outside and I hear all this like landscaping power equipment running. It's really noisy. And I'm like, I can't make a video. It doesn't matter if I have a windscreen. I can't make a video with all this noise. But the room I usually use, my son is sleeping in. That's too much nonsense. Today, because I had something on my mind. I woke up with this topic on my mind and I was like, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the hidden spiritual benefits of healing that I have noticed in my life. So in 4 years, healing with medical medium information, I have healed symptoms of POTS, Ehlers-Danlos, SIBO, hypothyroid, systemic exertion intolerance, and I can't talk. Systemic exertion intolerance disorder, chronic fatigue syndrome, migraines. I've healed so many symptoms. I've done videos where it's like over 115 symptoms, and I was like, I didn't even know I had that many symptoms. But when I looked at them all, and some of them I think it's just because I didn't realize they were symptoms. I just thought, this is just how my body works. But it turned out, it was a symptom. Actually, it doesn't work that way, and it can go away. And as you know, if you are familiar with the medical medium information, it tells you what foods are healing and what foods are troublemakers. So what foods can help you on your journey and and even how they help you, and even the spiritual benefit. If you read Life-Changing Foods, which is an incredible book, it's over 50 different foods, and not just physically how they help you and what symptoms and conditions they'll help with, but also spiritually and emotionally how they can help you and the lessons you can get from them. It's incredible. So I refer back to that book a lot. All of the books, honestly. I have all 6 books, all 6 medical medium books, and I refer back to each one of them for different reasons at different times. And I also utilize his online archive of radio shows on SoundCloud. It's available in other places too, but I listen to it through SoundCloud, so that's where I know to tell you. I listen to the books on audiobook. There's all the Facebook and Instagram lives that he's amassed now, and I go back and I look through those sometimes. There's so much information as far as like putting together all the pieces parts, and the more you listen to and read and all that, the more you integrate it. And over time, lowering the fats in my diet and eating more and more fresh fruits and vegetables, whether raw or cooked in some way, I've noticed things that I didn't ever expect to happen. First of all, huge effect on my mental health. Huge effect on my mental health. I have had chronic depression off and on since I was 14 years old. I have suffered with anxiety to varying degrees, and when I was my sickest, it was its highest. It was debilitating anxiety, like anxiety disorder I was diagnosed with. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, GAD. Because it's like, you have anxiety for no reason is basically what that means. It's just anxiety all over the place. It's not, only in this situation, but it definitely would heighten in certain situations on an airplane but like even social anxiety, like it got bad. It got to where when I was my sickest, like I said, I couldn't answer the phone, make a phone call. I was paralyzed. I honestly believe I started to develop agoraphobia. It's interesting because at that time I had a friend I was talking to and he had agoraphobia, and we would compare notes and talk about it. And I was like, oh, I think this is what I have, because I was afraid to leave the house because I reacted to everything. I was allergic to everything. And I just started to be like, I can't leave this house. If I leave this house, I'm doomed. Because every time I would leave the house, I would end up just kind of flat on my back for weeks. And I already lived flat on my back because I lived on Mattress Island and Sofa Island. I would get up in the morning and go straight to the sofa, and that's like all I could really do. And it was miserable. So I already had complex PTSD because I've had traumas in my life. You know, I lost a child. Okay, I can't think too much about any of that. I already had complex PTSD because I lost a child, but there were also other traumas. I had miscarriages and stuff like that. But our son died when he was 2 years and 9 months old, and there was a lot of PTSD about that. But becoming chronically ill and discovering that I had these chronic illnesses and trying to get answers for them gave me a new kind of complex medical PTSD on top of all of my other PTSDs I already had. And I actually already had medical PTSD from when my son was alive, because he was born with a severe heart defect and we were in and out of hospitals his entire life. So there was that, and then trying to navigate the medical system with the crappiest insurance in the land. It's called Kaiser, by the way. It was just like a horrible, like their particular system it's like a closed loop system where the insurance company owns the practitioners. So it owned, I thought that was illegal, but it seems like a huge conflict of interest. And it was actually in practice a huge conflict of interest. But so they provide the insurance, but they also provide all the practitioners, and you have to go to practitioners within their network, and you can sort of go to some outside of network, but it's also really small. Anyway, it was terrible. And their whole policy is like minimal intervention, which means don't do anything that costs us money, like run tests or actually take any complaint that any patient has seriously, because we don't want you to spend any money on them. It was horrible trying to get answers out of a system like that. I also went to alternative practitioners, naturopaths, acupuncturists, massage therapists, chiropractors. Honestly, the only one of any of those that I felt actually gave me any relief at all, even though it was temporary, were the massage therapists. And everybody else was just throwing darts and no answers. And the conventional medical system was, here's a pill, and the naturopaths and all that stuff were kind of still, here's a pill, but it was throwing darts. It was the supplements, or do this or try that, or they didn't know either. Nobody knew. Nobody had any answers for me. Anyway, so lots of PTSD there. It really sort of traumatized me, made my anxiety go through the roof. And honestly, I think with chronic illness, a lot of times chronic physical illnesses do calm mental illnesses, because you get beaten down, you get your trust broken so many times, you get traumatized by the systems and by not getting answers and by people not taking you seriously and all that stuff. So there was a lot of that, and it breaks your soul, stuff like that. And then just having traumas in your life, like that breaks your soul. It's really difficult, and you lose faith, and you lose hope, and you lose trust. And also part of my chronic illness, I had my fight or flight. I was such a, like everything was out of whack. My liver was slow and sluggish, so that made everything else just way overloaded. My vagus nerve was activated. My nervous system was just on full overload. Everything was just so overloaded that I was so adrenalized and traumatized and just stressed out all the time from having chronic illness and just fully not being able to function and all of that stuff, that I was just in fight or flight all the time. So I was on a hair trigger. I literally was in a space mentally where you could look at me wrong and I would either scream or burst into tears. Or both, sometimes both. It would just, all the time. Not like 24/7, but most of the time, honestly. And it made me a bear to live with, particularly for my husband. And I feel like a bear would be more pleasant to live with. An angry bear. I was like an angry bear. And I was so easily triggered. I was so easily triggered all the time. I could just fly off the handle at seemingly nothing. It wasn't ever nothing to me, because I was just so fragile and just so like raw, and my nerves were just so shot and frazzled all the time. So I was just completely on edge around everything, and I could just go into sobbing or screaming or anything. But the other thing about that is, if I did have a strong emotional reaction to anything, that would trigger the mast cell activation disorder, and I would have like I would have a physical reaction to it, and also like I would rash and have headaches, and I would have super fatigue, lots of brain fog, all that stuff. And then I'd be knocked out for like days or even weeks from a large emotional response. But because my fight or flight was just on all the time, my adrenals were so shot, and they would either go too high, too low. It was a huge fluctuation all the time. I was just a crazy mess. And I was never something I could control. So I know that there's this school of thought where it's mind over matter and you should just be able to control your thoughts. But when you're loaded with toxic heavy metals and other toxins, and you don't know how to get them out of your body, and you're loaded with pathogens, and all the toxins coming in are feeding all the pathogens, and it's like symptoms everywhere. It's just, I just picture like a sprinkler or like fireworks, like it's just symptoms everywhere just coming out of you. And it's like I would feel like I was outside of my body watching myself sometimes, and I couldn't do anything to stop it or control it. I would hear the things that I would say and go, oh my gosh, what? It was like I don't know, I've never been possessed, I don't think, but sometimes it did seem like that. Like I was possessed. Like it was just like, who is that doing that? And it's like I would just be listening and paying. It's like watching myself just lose my mind all the time. And I felt so out of control all the time, and I hated it because I felt like a prisoner in my body for so many reasons, but I also felt like a prisoner to my emotional responses, and I was just triggered by everything. It was so miserable. It was so miserable. Have any of you ever experienced something like that? In any point in your life where you just felt like, I can't control this, like you're outside your body watching yourself, and you're like, why am I saying those things? Like, oh, you shouldn't say that, but you can't stop it. It's just, and it was a struggle. It was really a struggle for all of us, for my whole family. Yeah, I'm sure it gave my husband PTSD because he had to walk on eggshells around me all the time, but he couldn't either because he was so stressed out, and he was kind of on a hair trigger too, so it was just like a mess. So I found the medical medium information, and I started implementing what he says to do in the book, and not all of it, and not, it was a very slow process for me. It took me a long time to get the fats out. To even lower the fats, it took a really long time. I was still eating rice for like the first year. I was still eating salt until just a few months ago. And like I said, 4 years. Not a lot of salt, but salt. And medical medium has told us salt pickles the liver. I didn't understand how intensely, like how important it's kind of one of those things, like you do what you can over time. And that's the important thing. It is important to just do what you can over time. I took out all the no foods. That, honestly, that was not hard for me because I had already drastically changed my diet so many times, and I was at the point. So it's just, I could name so many, but I'm just going to kind of go back a little bit and name a couple. So we'd done GAPS and then SCD and all that stuff, and then we were doing paleo, and then it went to, because I was reacting to stuff on paleo is getting worse, and then autoimmune paleo, because that takes out all the nightshades and the eggs and things like, and I can't even remember what else, but so you're minimizing, you're taking out more foods, you're still eating super high fat and super high protein. Is like every meal was fat and protein. It's the same thing. Every meal was fat. And then I went to low FODMAP autoimmune paleo, which takes out even more foods. And I was about to do like I think I was about to do low oxalate, low FODMAP autoimmune paleo, which takes out even more foods. I was already down to like maybe a dozen foods that I could eat, and nothing was working. I was just getting worse and worse. Nothing was helping me heal. And then I found the medical medium information, and I was super excited because I was going to get back foods. I was going to get back fruits and vegetables, which I missed so much. And I'm like, I'll stop eating this meat. And he doesn't say to stop eating meat, but for me, it was like, I'll stop eating it 3 times a day, because I didn't stop immediately. I didn't. So gradually, I started implementing the things. I did celery juice. And then I would have a smoothie after that. And it wasn't at first the heavy metal detox smoothie. That was like 4 or 5 months down the line I started that. And then I would have a salad for lunch. And then at dinner, I would have protein. I would have fat. But my salads, I think, also had like avocado-based dressing or tahini or something like that. So I was still eating fat at lunch. I was only doing fat-free mornings. Baby steps, sometimes it's baby steps. Doesn't happen all at once. Now, I've done the 28-day cleanse a few times, fully raw, fat-free. I've done the 369 a bunch of times. I did the thyroid, in the thyroid healing book, I did the thyroid cleanse once. I eat fat-free, I have for several months now. I eat salt-free, I have for a couple of months now. So it's just, it evolves. So I like to do I'd eat high raw. I'm gonna do more rounds of the advanced 369 cleanse. But that's, it's like at different stages in your journey, you're ready for different things. So here's what I've noticed in this time, eating this way, what has come to pass. And I think this part of it happened kind of early on. I'm gonna say within 18 months. So within 18 months, I noticed that, but it happened piece by piece, and it was one of those things where I looked back and I thought, oh, I remember how I used to react to everything, and I totally don't do that anymore. The hair trigger went away. I gradually was able to see a situation and respond to it and not just fly off the handle for no reason and not just, be completely triggered by everything around me. I learned to minimize things that were adrenalizing for me, that would cause my adrenaline to spike, like dramas and action movies, and just as far as entertainment, and interacting on social media in a kind of a mindless way, where I tweaked my Facebook to where my feed only shows, I hid everybody from my feed, everybody. All of my friends, I hid them so that I'm not just getting, because I'd get on Facebook and it would feel like I'm like walking down a hallway and then people are just shouting random opinions at me, and it was like so jarring and unsettling, and it would just mess with my head all the time. Before I kind of just was unaware of that, like it was just unconscious and I didn't know, but I just started to realize that. I started to really see like, oh, that's really, I can't do that. Like it's too much on my nervous system. It's too much for me. So I had hid everyone on my feed, and whatever shows up in my feed is only topical things from groups that's really benign, things about gardening or things about medical medium information or things about, stuff that's uplifting or stuff that makes me feel good or happy. I also, at this point, I spend hardly any time on Facebook. I don't really like Facebook. I like Instagram because it's pictures, and you can also totally control what you see there. Like, except for the ads. Those are annoying. But those are everywhere and you can't seem to escape them. But yeah, things that are adrenalizing. Social media can be really adrenalizing. Even positive social media, it can be very adrenalizing. And if your nervous system is sensitive, screens in general, just being constantly barraged with whatever, in general, it's a lot. Like the radiation from the devices and scrolling on anything and it's just like a sort of can be very distracting, and that can also be adrenalizing. So I learned to sort of minimize things like that, not get involved in dramas, not, whatever. Just realize how to take care of my mental health, how to take care of my space and have boundaries and say no and do what was best for my health. So that was huge because that came naturally over time. I just started to realize, oh, this is affecting me in this way. So I'm not going to expose myself to that, or I'm going to minimize exposure to that, or whatever it is. And finding things that I can focus my attention on that are uplifting. So another thing I noticed really happened is that my intuition became much clearer. I was much better able to listen to it. I was much better able to recognize it. Well, recognizing it in the first place as my voice, as my intuition versus wishful thinking or whatever. Or sometimes you just dismiss it. You're like, oh, that's not possible. Like, that's not going to happen or whatever. But I just learned to hear it better. I learned to recognize it and acknowledge it and hear it better. It just became clearer. It's almost like I became more solid in myself and knowing who I am and what's mine versus what's not mine. And that's another thing, is that I've really noticed more what's mine versus what's not mine. And here's a tip for you. We are beings of light, okay? If you're watching this video, you're probably in that category. I think that in general, humans are in that category. We have free will. We make choices along the way. We can take ourselves down dark roads and we can go into darkness, or we can choose the light. We can choose what best supports our soul and what best uplifts us and heals us. And we have free will. We can make other choices as well. And I certainly have. I'm not judging or knocking anybody for what choices, but a lot of the choices we make are unconscious choices. We have voices in our heads telling us to make certain choices, telling us things about ourselves, saying negative things, telling us negative things about other people or whatever, but a lot of it's about us. We think those are our voices, and they're not. Those voices came from somewhere else. They come from, and then they create wounding, right? So they could be an echo of your parents or other adults you had in your life growing up. But that voice, even if it's theirs, is still coming from some wound in them that isn't them and isn't theirs. Because I've never tried to explain this before. Forgive me. I hope this makes sense. But just as I've gone through this healing, I've known more and more, like, you know how medical medium Anthony William, how he says, every morning I get up and I say, I work for God. Well, I started saying that. I was like, okay, I'll do that. And I started saying that. And at first, I couldn't say God. I said, I work for the light. Because I have wounding around religion and I think of God as religious, and I don't think I ever understood God growing up. When I was very young, I drew a picture of God. I think I had gone to like this YMCA summer camp or something. And I think it was a week. It was just a day camp. But I think we went for like a week or something like that. I don't really remember. I was quite young. But we were singing songs about God, and it was kind of my first introduction to, because my mom had been raised Catholic, and she was very wounded by her upbringing. She had a lot of trauma from her upbringing. And so she fully rejected all Christian type religions. She was just like, no, that's no. And she got really super into Eastern type religions and Eastern philosophy. And it has a very different, like, there's God in it, but it's like God's within you as opposed to outside of you. And that's so simplistic. Anyway, I'm saying the philosophy she got into. I know that not every Eastern philosophy is created equal, and they're not all the same. And but the one that she got really into. So anyway, she was sort of just new to all of it, and had just rejected that side of herself before. So when I drew this picture. I went to the camp and I drew this picture, and my picture was of God. I drew a picture of God. I drew a picture of this bright diamond, colorful diamond in the sky, like radiating light. And then on the ground, on the earth part of it. So that was God. But there was also, I don't know why I remember this picture, but I remember this picture. I can see it in my mind. I was such a little kid when I drew this. I was maybe 7. But I also drew a picture of a man with a long beard and a robe. Like he had a dark, I think it was like a brown beard and a robe. It was probably like images I had seen of Jesus. I was probably drawing that depiction. But I was like, and my mom said, "Oh, what's this a picture of?" And I said, "Oh, this is God." And to me, it was they both were like the image of the man, and then the diamond in the sky, the light in the sky. They were both God. And she kind of freaked out, and like I never saw that picture again. I don't know what she did with it. She probably threw it in the trash or something. I don't want you to think my mom is a villain or a horrible person. She just had her own wounding. She had her own wounds around things, but I think energetically, it's like I got that there was something wrong with that. Like I was like, oh, I did something bad and that was wrong, and like, so God is bad and wrong or something. Anyway, so I grew up kind of not, and then, people I hung out with and stuff like that, nobody was really, over time, it just kind of solidified and became embedded and repeated that lesson of like, don't mention God, that's not a good thing. And so I just that's what I learned. And I don't feel that way anymore. I don't feel that way at all anymore. I don't know how to say this because it's almost like there's a way that I could say this and then someone's going to hear, oh, she got religious. And that's not at all the case. I still am like, about religion. I don't hate religion or anything. I totally respect religion, and I respect people who believe in and follow religions. I'm just not there. I'm not in that space. I feel like often religion takes the purity and the spirituality away from our connection with the divine, the creator, God, the light, Gaia, whatever. I can appreciate so much like churches and people gathering in space, churches and temples and mosques and all of it, like people gathering in spaces together to pray and to focus on their spirituality and to appreciate their creator. That I'm all for. It's the dogma and the bureaucracy and the stuff like that that sort of happens around that I'm just like, no. The politics even, I don't know. It makes it feel tainted and icky to me. Anyway, so what I am saying is healing has brought me back a connection with God that is real, and where I have like such a different understanding of God. And I also feel like so much of my soul has been restored. Do you guys read Harry Potter? Have you read the Harry Potter books? I love the Harry Potter books. Do you know how in the Harry Potter books, he who must not be named has Horcruxes, where it's like pieces of his soul are in all of these little objects that are shattered and spread throughout wherever? That's how I felt. I felt like when I read the Harry Potter books, I remember thinking, J.K. Rowling knows loss, because this is exactly what loss feels like. It feels like you have pieces of your soul just scattered throughout. And it's like, how could you ever put those back together? And even if you do, that'll all still be cracked and broken. And there might still be just little chips missing. That's what chronic illness was like. That's what losing my son was like. That's what all of the traumas that I've experienced that I don't really want to talk about were like. It's like all of those together. It was just like each time it would take a piece of my soul and it would break it and scatter it. And I felt so broken all the time. And healing with this information has slowly restored those pieces. And not just restored them, but instead of it being like something that's glued back together where you can see all the cracks and stuff, it's like it's kind of smoothed it, but somehow still stronger and richer and wiser, I guess. I feel like because of what I've gone through and what I've experienced, it does give me more compassion for others. And when they're experiencing something, it's like I feel like it's like I've been through the war, I've been through the battle. I get it. I know. It makes me appreciate anyone who shows compassion too, because I just think, you were hurt. What happened? Something happened to you to give you such incredible compassion. I am still on a healing journey, and there is more healing for my soul to do. There's more trust, because along the way of healing, I've had my trust broken again and again. But I noticed that my resilience, like with the physical things that happen, my resilience is better. I know it's temporary. I know it's going to pass, and I bounce back more quickly. I feel it's like I'm stronger in myself. I'm more identified with the light in me than a victim to negative thoughts or stuff that happens in my head that I think is mine. I don't think it's mine anymore. I know that if I'm having these negative thoughts or if I'm having these spiraling patterns, it doesn't mean I don't get caught up in them. I just did videos where I told you that I did. I can get caught up in them, but it happens with less frequency than it ever used to, like really a lot less frequency. And I'll have an episode of something happening, but I come back so much quicker. And it's like every day I am stronger in myself, more solid in myself, stronger in my faith, so much more solid in my faith. I never talked to God. And, the angels, I feel like the habit of talking to the angels built up that trust and built up that faith. And then I was ready to feel and hear and experience God. And that doesn't mean that I'm having conversations where like I hear God talking to me. I wish. I don't. It's more of a knowing and an experience and a trust. I don't know. I don't know. It's still a little bit new for me, and it's something that it's taken me a long time to even feel like I can talk about, because I don't know how to talk about it. B, it's so personal. It's so personal. This is really big. It's like, it's so big, and I don't have the adequate words and to really expand on this experience, and I want to do it justice. I want to explain it, and I want to share it, but it's like, how do you, it's so, it's just so big. It's so big, and it's so personal, and it's everything. But it's been so incredibly healing for me to experience that and experience that entire transformation. And I think because it's like, as I gain more and more trust in the medical medium information and hearing Anthony talk, and he will talk about God, and I'm like, well, if he's saying this and he's getting information from Spirit, then this is really true. And I just thought about it more. It's like I want to know more, and I thought about it more, and I connected with it more, and I would ask the angels to help me connect even more. I still do. I ask the angels, I ask God. But when he said every morning, he says, I work for God, I do that. And it's like, I used to just say the light, and then I said God and the light. And now a lot of times I just say God, and I'll forget to say the light. It's kind of a habit, so a lot of times I'll say the light too, but just because we are the light. Those voices in our heads are not ours. They don't come from us. They don't belong to us. I remember a long time ago somebody is saying to me, so I wanted to do this personal growth work program, but I didn't have the money to do it. And my friend said, I'll lend you the money. I'll put it on my credit card. And I didn't know this friend well. We had only recently met and become acquainted, and we're still getting to know each other. And I was like, I cannot let you pay for, there wasn't any romantic involvement or anything like that. It was just, I'm like, I can't let you pay for me to do this. That's a lot of money. And you don't know me. Like, you don't know if I'm going to pay you back. I mean, I will, but you don't know that. Like, he's like, you will. He's like, I trust that you will. It's fine. And I said, I can't do that. And he said, well, why not? And I said, well, I mean, my mom always told me to, my mom always taught me to be independent and don't ask for help from people, and don't expect other people to, whatever, to bail you out of things or whatever. And he said, oh, okay. And he said, well, what would Ichota do if she didn't have that? Ta-da! The room became available. It was getting too loud in the other room. So my son woke up. It was too loud in the other room. I'm going to finish. As I was saying, he said, what would Ichota do if that had never happened? Without all the stuff that her mom said to her, or whatever, and all the stuff you were taught growing up, what would Ichota do? And I thought about it for a second, and honestly, it didn't even take me long. I thought, Ichota would take the money. And he said, okay, great, here's my credit card. And that is how I signed up and did that personal growth work. And that was an incredible decision. It was really a breakthrough for me in just realizing, like, oh, I'm not all of those things. Like, I'm not all of the limitations that were put on me, and I'm not all of the things that other people have told me about myself. And now I understand that on a whole different level, because I really realize, like, all of those things were external to me and not who I really am. Who my soul really is the one who has the intuition, is the one who sees possibility in things, is the one who is willing to throw her hat over the fence and have faith and just know that things will work out and take those risks. And the one who follows her heart, and the one who feels the joy and the sunshine and the light and finds the good in things, who can see the silver lining. All of those limitations and all of those negative things that you say about yourself, or all of those, or you think you're saying about yourself, but it's not even you. It's not yours, and it's not even you. It's something else outside of you that's not yours. And it doesn't, honestly, I don't even think it matters where it came from. I don't think we even need to dig and be like, oh, where did I first hear that? Well, I don't even think that's important. I think just recognizing that it's not yours, and just recognizing that this did not come from me. Who am I really? What would I do? What would I say? Who do I know I am? And eating this way and getting my body cleaned out and cleaning up and all of this stuff has really brought me to the understanding of that. And yeah, I definitely had other emotional support and help along the way, but it's made it so clear for me. And it keeps getting clearer. It makes it become clearer for me. Who I really am is this light. So who I really am would never think that I'm not capable of doing a thing, or I'm not good enough for something, or I'm less than ever. Because that's not light. That's not what light is. That's not my soul. That's not my true potential. That's not like who I am at my core, my essence. So, have you all heard the song I Am Light by India.Arie? I wake up in the morning and I will have songs running through my head. And sometimes it's okay because it's something that's good and positive and uplifting. But a lot of times it'll be stupid things like freaking commercial jingles from 20 years ago or from ever. Who even cares? Like, they're just all bad and horrible. Or like some tune that I've heard on the radio, or just somehow extraneously, or through osmosis somehow, that is just ugh. And like the lyrics are not positive and don't give you, it's not something you want to repeat to yourself like over and over again, you know. But sometimes I'll listen to a song and that's what I'll wake up running through my head, and it'll be something uplifting and beautiful and positive. And the most recent one, I've listened to it a few times recently, like kind of repeatedly. And so I'll sometimes wake up with that earworm, and it's that song I Am Light by India.Arie, and I'm gonna misquote the lyrics because I haven't memorized the song, but part of it is like, I'm not the color of my skin, I'm not the places I have been, I'm not, see, I told you I'm gonna misquote it. It's something about like, I'm not my family's choices or something like that. Like, I'm not, and I love that song so much because it's like, yes, that's exactly it. Like, we are not those things. I'm not the sum of all of the choices that have been made for me that I didn't have any say in. I am not what you said about me. I'm not the things that, you know, in me that you think weren't enough because you have some wound that tells you you're not enough. Like, I'm not any of those things. None of us are. You're not what your parents said about you, unless they said positive things. But even that, because even having my parents, my family tell me like, I'm small, you're so smart when I was a kid, made me feel like I had to live up to something. And then I always had to be smart so that they would approve of me and love me, because that was the only way to get them to love me, is if I was smart. And this is not what they said or what, it's just what I took from it. I have to be smart. This is what people like. This is what they want. They want me to be this. And I felt like I always had to live up to something. And then it made me afraid ever to fail. It made me afraid to take risks and because what if I fail? So I'd be afraid to answer a question if I thought I might get it wrong. And I would be afraid to, like, I felt like I had to get everything right all the time. It gave me kind of a complex, like I have to be smart, I have to be smart. And then I felt like I had to prove that I was smart. And if people didn't know, don't you know I'm smart? Like, that's what people like about me. Muffins wanted to come in and get her snuggle on, be in the video, say hi to me for the morning. Okay, so I'm digressing a little bit, but it dampened my light, you know, it dampened me knowing that just who I was okay and perfect just because I was. And this healing journey has given that back to me because, again, I realized it doesn't matter. None of that matters because who I really am is my soul, my true essence. And it's easier to get in touch with what would that person do. And I still have all that conditioning and all that programming from my life before of just living on this planet. So it doesn't mean that that stuff doesn't run through my head, and it doesn't mean that I don't get hooked into it sometimes, because I totally do. But even just to have the distinction is a big deal. To realize, like, oh, that's... And I know it'll pass because it's not me. It's not part of me. And then I'm not at fault for it. Like, it means it takes the weight of feeling like, oh, I'm such a bad person or whatever. Like, I'm not. I'm human. I got hooked into something. You know, this stuff is just, it's not mine. I don't have to engage with it. And that it's just really empowering to realize that. And like this morning, what made me think of talking about this in a video is that my cat Pendleton, when he comes to bed, he'll come to bed and he'll decide he wants some snuggling and pets. And so he'll kind of wake me up. He'll jump on me and he'll kind of walk on my body until until I'm like, what? And then I start petting him. And sometimes I don't even wake up and I just pet him. And sometimes I pet him and then it kind of wakes me up because I'm like, he's like so affectionate and rubbing on my face and all this stuff. And I'm like petting him. And if I put my hand down, he'll like put his head under, like, no, you're still petting me. So I'll pet him. Then he'll lay down, and sometimes he'll lay between my legs and just purr, and then he'll go to sleep. And sometimes I'll fall back asleep when he does that. And other times it'll be close enough to when I would normally get up that I just get up. And I was thinking, I love that cat so much that it doesn't even bother me that he wakes me up. And I was thinking, that's never been true in my life before. Like, I've never felt like just so peaceful with being disrupted. And having your sleep interrupted, I mean, notoriously throughout my life, having my sleep interrupted has been unacceptable, and I've not been okay with it. And with the exception of my sons, obviously, I would have my sleep disrupted for them, and I'd be okay with it. But even though that's the case, I would sometimes still be like, oh, like a little bit resentful of having to wake up for something. And then before, when I was chronically ill, I'd wake up several times a night to go to the bathroom, and because I had urinary and bladder issues because of the strep in my system, and it would just wreck me every time I had to get up, and it would mess with my sleep, and I would be so disheveled and would feel like insomnia and it'd be horrible. And now that I've done so much healing, and I've really, it's like my sleep has turned around so much, and I eat a lot of cleansing foods, and I drink a lot of liquids. I'm very hydrated, so I'm eating lots of fruits and vegetables. And so sometimes, especially if I do things like eat melon in the afternoon, There's a reason Anthony Williams says, medical medium says to eat it in the morning. And if I have it later in the day, sometimes I just can't help it. I just want it. I will end up getting up in the night to pee more than once. Sometimes I just get up once. Like, it's just a normal matter of course. Sometimes I get up once, sometimes it's more than once. But it doesn't bother me anymore. I don't get upset by it. I'm just like, okay, I just get up, do it, go back to sleep. And I'm not, and even if I wake up, if the cat or my son or whatever wakes me up and it's like 4:30 in the morning, which is way earlier than I usually get up, I'm okay with 6. Usually I get up around like 7 or 8, I think. I'm okay with 6. 4:30 is really pushing it. But even when that happens, I'm just like, okay. And I just get up and I do my thing. I do my routine. And I use the time to like go out in my garden and, spend time out there, water the plants, do any tending they need. And it doesn't bother me. Like, I'm not like, oh man, I got woken up and now I lost sleep, and it doesn't like make my day grumpy or anything like that. I'm just like, okay, well, now we're doing this. And I get up and I do my thing and I have my day and I do my routine. And if by 1 p.m. I'm zonked and need a nap, I go take a nap, and I just take a quick nap, a half hour, an hour, get back up, do my thing. It's just like, I'm just like, it's all fine. It's all like, I'm much more fluid. I'm not triggered. I'm not reactive. I'm not freaking out. And it's really cool. It feels so great to feel that way and to have that experience and to notice the difference. Like, I was not like this before. I couldn't handle, like, I would get mad at the animals. I would get mad at everything. I would be like, I interrupted my sleep, and I'd be so mad. And that's because I had all those, my poor liver, bogged down with all those toxins and all that work and all those, it was just struggling, and I was struggling, and so many emotions coming from both of us, me and my liver. It was a lot. It was so overloaded before, and now I just have this peace of mind that I don't know if I've ever had in my whole entire life, honestly. I don't know if I have. This is so different. It's so different. And okay, here's yet another thing. I understand my animals and the insects and the birds and the whole, and nature. It's like I appreciate it on a whole new level that I never did before. I've always had cats my entire life. I grew up with, I had since I was born, and I loved cats. When Frenzy died the most recently, I realized that it was the first time I had not had a cat in the house in maybe 20 years, because we had, with her were 3 other cats, and she was the last of those. And so when she died, it was like, oh my gosh, how long has it even been since there hasn't been a cat? And I was like, well, this isn't right, and that's why we have Pendleton. I was like, we need a cat. I have to have there's got to be a cat in the house. It's not okay to not have a cat in the house. So I've loved animals. It's not that I didn't love them, but I didn't see them the way I see them now. Like their essence and who they are. And it's like, yeah, I knew they had personalities and stuff like that, but I don't even know how to explain it. It's like I'm more in touch with them, and I understand them on a different level, and I get that they're sentient beings. And part of that is that, again, after starting the medical medium information, at some point even before that, someone had told me that pet psychics existed, and there were these animal communicators, and I was kind of interested in it, but I didn't really pursue it and research it or look into it. But then I don't even remember what, it came into my consciousness again, and I was like, I want to find out more about this. And it started on YouTube, and I was looking for YouTube videos and trying to find videos with pet psychics. And then I thought, oh, I bet some of them have written books. And so I look at the library and find out, in fact, lots of them have written books. There's a ton of books by pet psychics, and there's all kinds of stuff on animal communication. So I start reading. I get a bunch of the books, and I read a bunch of the books, and I just became fascinated with that people could communicate with animals, and then also realizing, like, hearing what the animals said and their perspective, and realizing these are thinking, coherent, sentient beings. These are not like, what we always perceive our pets to be. Not always. I feel like not anymore. People are really coming into a consciousness where they are much more aware that animals are, in fact, thinking, sentient beings. But that, like, they're not just pets, and that they do have their own thoughts and feelings, and they do have preferences, and they do have, like, their thinking is nuanced, complex, and layered. It's a different kind of thinking to ours. It's kind of a little bit more like, it's hard to say because different animals are different, just like people. It's like some of them, it's kind of more like a young child, but then other ones have like this wisdom. And it's just depends on who you're talking to, you know, like what animal you're talking to and what animal communicator too. And anyway, I became so fascinated with that, and I wanted to learn more about it. And there are ways you can learn, and I'm totally going to pursue that at some point, like really practicing. But then I started to realize that I actually do have a pretty strong connection with my animals, where I often feel like I just intuitively know what they are asking for, what they want. And it's like I really feel that connection with Pendleton a lot. Like, he is my boy, and I have been so completely tolerant. Now, listen, he is a prince. He is a smart cat. He is strong-willed, willful, and he wants what he wants, and he wants it now. He is curious and energetic and playful, and all of that means that he gets into mischief. He has done a lot of things that probably a lot of people would be like, no, you've got to go back. And there was a big struggle with him in the first year of his life with our family, where both my husband and my son were like, he can't be with us, he's got to go. And I was just like, I don't know why, but like none of his behavior bothered me. I just was like, oh, but that's just his nature, he's a cat, and all this stuff. And it did bother my son, and it did bother my husband, and they were pretty grumpy about it. And I didn't ever get grumpy about it. And I was like, this is not like me, honestly. I have such an incredible connection with him. And now his connection with my son has grown exponentially, and he often prefers my son to me, and I'm just delighted by that too. I'm like, oh, it's great, because, you know, I love that their relationship is growing. But I'm like, wow, I'm just not bothered. It's just like, it's okay. Like, that's just like, you have to understand where they're coming from. And that's true of humans or animals or anything. And I really do feel like I just have noticed. And even in my garden, if I go out in my garden, I see these insects. I feel like there's, on some level, like I understand where they're coming from. Like, there's a wasp in my garden, and she's a wasp. And I've always, like, I love bees. I love all the bees. I love them, but I have never been a fan of wasps. I've always been like, oh, they sting and they're dangerous and I don't like them. And so I never really kind of took the time to understand them or try to understand them. But being in my garden, I mean, there's a wasp that lives out there. I think she's a paper wasp, she's a red paper wasp. She lives out there and she hangs out. And then I watched her, like, as the lettuce grew, she'd hang out in the lettuce. And I kind of learned more about wasps and what they eat. And I think about more of like the ecosystem of the garden and stuff like that. Or not just the garden, but just like the ecosystem in general. But like, I'm there in it every day, like really observing it. And it makes me see, like, I started to realize, I'm like, I think the wasp is actually keeping the pests down in the garden. Like, she was eating the grubs and the larvae of things that would devour my plants. And she was like hanging out in the shade of the lettuce and just doing her thing, and she didn't bother me and she didn't do anything. And I'm like, man, I think she's healing my terror of wasps. She totally has, actually. Not I think, she did. She totally, I'm like not scared of them anymore. I don't know that I was scared of them, I just like didn't like them. But I get like, no, they don't just all come at you and sting you. Hornets and yellow jackets, those are the ones that those aren't friends really, but she's just a paper wasp. She just hangs out in the garden. And I've seen other little wasps that are come in and pollinate, and I'm trying to learn what each pollinator who comes into my garden is. Anyway, I don't want to go too much into my garden because that's going to take me on another tangent, but the whole point is just, this is what healing has given me, is just the ability to slow down and observe and see and interact with and participate and not get triggered by things and not just go reacting, but like look further into them. Like, oh, okay, well, there's this wasp here. Well, what is she? Let me find out about her. Let me read about her. Let me learn about who she is. I did that too when we had at our old house, we had skunks, and I did the same thing. I was like, well, okay, well, what do skunks eat? And it turns out that they ate voles and moles and stuff like that. So they kept, and field mice, and like they eat little rodents. So I was like, well, actually the skunks are beneficial. So we don't need to try to figure out how to get rid of the skunks. We just need to figure out how can we live with them. And I went back to the skunks, because they, our particular skunks, I think they lived under our shed. And that was in the back of our property. And so, our yard. And so I went back to the shed, and also the compost pile was back there, and they will eat compost too. So I was like, oh, perfect. And I said, listen, you guys, I just want to let you know, I'm not going to mess with you. I'm not going to try to get rid of you or anything like that. You were here first. Let's live together. I'm like, you can have all the moles and voles and field mice and compost that you want. You can eat the compost. That's cool. I'm totally happy with that. And you just you keep away from us and we'll keep away from you. I'm like, we're not going to mess with you. Please don't spray us. That's all I ask. And they never did. And we had a happy coexistence for 5 years. It worked out really well. This is what healing has given me. It's just given me this sort of quiet within myself to observe rather than react, and to investigate, to stay curious and to investigate and to look into things and figure, like, okay, well, here's this pollen, like here's this flying insect. Should I be worried about this flying insect? I don't know. Let me go learn more before I make that decision. No, I shouldn't be worried because they're all pretty cool. Another place that I just have found that I have more peace now is I do not get freaked out by a symptom. If I have some kind of flare, or I start getting a symptom, or anything, even if something big happens, it's like I can get hooked. And I can get a spin out a little bit sometimes. But there's some part of me that always comes back to realizing all storms will pass. This is gonna pass. This is temporary. I'm gonna get through this just like I've gotten through everything else in my life. I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay. I have the tools. I know these things help. Sometimes it takes time. But I know what to do. There is such an incredible freedom and peace that comes with just knowing that you have that foundation, so that whatever is happening in the world around you, you will be able to cope with it. You will be able to get through it. You do have the tools. You are going to be okay because you know there's not that uncertainty, and that which creates the fear, the fear of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? And I'm not saying I never have those thoughts, because of course I do. Of course, sometimes I get wind of new levels of things that happen in the world, or I just start thinking about what I already know about what's going on in the world, and I'm just like, holy heck, how are we going to make it through? But if I combine the healing that I've done, and I combine the faith that I've built, and knowing that I'm supported by my body and the foundation that I have of healing, I have the healing tools from Medical Medium, I have God, I have the angels, I have the meditations that Medical Medium has given us. Honestly, it's like everything I need is right there. And throughout this journey, I have turned to other things, but I noticed that they eventually kind of fall away, and it always just comes back to the Medical Medium information, because that's what still stays true no matter what. The other things kind of come and go, and it's like, when what resonates with me at one point, it kind of eventually maybe stops or maybe keeps, I don't know. But the Medical Medium information, it just stays steady and true, and I feel so freed by that. And it's like the longer I am doing it, the more just solid I feel in everything, and in everything. Literally, it's improved my relationship with my husband, because I'm not, just flying off the handle all the time. It's improved my relationships with my animals, with my son, like, just, it's incredible. It's incredible what it's given me. This video is so long. Okay. This is probably the longest video I've ever done. Thank you so much for watching this video, for hearing my heart and my soul, and for being on this journey. I just want to tell you that I know that this experience is not exclusive to me. I've talked to other people who have been healing for a longer period of time, and this is just kind of like what happens. Like, all of these things start to lift, and things start to fall into place, and faith builds and trust builds, and this is what happens. So I want to encourage anyone else to stay with it, because it's such an incredible feeling, and I know it's just gonna keep going from here. If I do what I want to do now, and I do several rounds of the 369 advanced cleanse, and I'm raw, I'm like, just more layers are gonna come up and out, and I'll just be clearer and clearer. It only just keeps being more amazing. So I just want to encourage you to stick with it. If you are waffling or doubting, just know that it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. That's what I can tell you. I love you so much, my healers and health seekers. If you like this video, please give a thumbs up below. You can subscribe to my channel by hitting the subscribe button over there. You can ding the bell next to it if you want to be notified when I post a new video. I wish you all so many blessings on your continued healing journey. Stay curious, my healers and heart seekers and health seekers. Stay curious. Oh, I love you so much. I love you. Just take heart. Just take heart. Know that you can heal. I will see you next time. Thank you.